We had been speaking about inflation in our first podcast, and I remember we were making the example of a pond.
Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started into this episode.
Inflation is good if it's in a reasoned measure. Well, if it's in an excess, inflation starts to be bad for the economy. And when you have inflation with low growth, you have a thing that's called stagflation, and that's even worse. I must say that the current situation is driving towards a stagflationary economy, and I think that the European Central Bank should be acting faster. On this topic, I come from the real estate industry, and inflation has always been something that's been good for real estate, as it's a parachute to keep value of the money. So we are seeing that there's a big movement in the real estate market. There's interest. People are looking for property. This is something that then in the midterm makes economy run around again.
I think people are interested in the fact that inflation can be good for you because you are in the real estate industry in Italy. Could you explain even more how your industry can benefit more in inflation, in an inflationary situation like we currently have it today in Italy and in other parts of the world?
So Italy is a country where there's a very high tier of owned property. We must think that almost 70% of Italians own a house. So it's not something that's going to be good only for me, but it's going to be good for many Italians. Inflation has an effect when you have debt. So the nominal value of your debt stays there, even if interest rates rise, but the nominal value of your property rises with inflation. And if you rent your property, the value of the rent will be rising. Who will have a problem with inflation are the fixed income workers. Government workers are between the ones that get higher problems, while freelance professionals, entrepreneurs, companies usually are able to ride the inflation wave. And in a manufacturing economy like the Italian economy, when we had inflation after the inflative period, we had even economic growth given by the search of new opportunities. So it activates, it makes people work over, and this is a good thing because you have to fight the rise of prices, and to fight the rise of prices, you have to be active on the market. You cannot be a passive income owner. So one of the things that had been seen when there is inflation, good inflation, so not Venezuela inflation, is that it activates entrepreneurship.
Okay, now say maybe if you were to listen to what your clients are telling you, okay, in this case, to see what they feel about this inflationary situation in the day-to-day conversation, of course. But what would you say is their concern today?
Well, for sure, the big concern of many people is that not only my clients or people I work with, but I think it's a global concern. And it's a thing we had been speaking about even last year, is the fact that they see the prices that rise day after day, time after time, and that's not always something that people are prepared to. So one of the big concerns I see is given by this fact that there's this challenge to keep up with the rising prices. Obviously, this goes to affect even other activities and all the global economy. So the big problem is that we have to avoid it to become a spiral. When it becomes a spiral, it becomes very dangerous.
Talking of the global economy, because this is something that is something that is happening in Europe that is sort of threatening both Europe and the whole of the global economy as it were. I'm talking of the war in Ukraine, the Russian war in Ukraine. So, do you think that there could be an effect on the European economy, and in this case, the inflationary situation that we are having today?
So many people are talking about this topic. I had the opportunity to confront myself on this argument, and I have some positions that are not very mainstream. I think that not doing all that was in the power of the European Union to avoid this war, considering that we import around 15% of raw materials from Russia, and that's a huge amount over the gas and other things, steel, nickel, agricultural basic products, fertilizers. Uh, so getting in a challenge and sanctioning Russia and not doing all that was in power of the European Union to avoid this war is something that's surely impacting. And I think that there would have been broader possibilities to avoid this. Some days before the outbreak of the Ukrainian crisis, we saw that Mr. Schultz was trying to find a matching between Ukraine and Russia. The thing is that, in my opinion, the whole thing has been managed in a very improper manner by the head of the European Union that is being acting against its own interests, and from a global perspective by the international agencies such as UN and NATO. It's a matter of fact that however will be the result of this crisis in Ukraine, victory of the Ukrainians or victory of the Russians, one thing is given, that Europe will come out of this weakened with commercial relations with a big buyer of its products that's going to be cut off and sent in the arms of China and India. And it's been it's going to be a matter of fact, years, 5 years, 10 years. But at this point, Russia will be diverting on Asia, while its first interest was to be actively involved in Europe. So this is maybe the main result. We will become a second-tier market, and China will be a first-tier market, and it's just a big shift. And this will bring even a shift in the supply chain.
All right. Inflation, money, transaction, business, international, and the war. And of course, all of them are linked together if we really trace the thread very well. No? What do you think the European Union would have done? What would have been their better reaction to the invasion or to the presence of the Russian army in the Ukrainian territory? What do you think would have been the better reaction?
Well, once you have the Ukrainian army or the Russian army in Ukraine, uh, it's difficult to act. But you could have been doing many things before. You could have not given all that credit to Ukraine. That's let's be honest, not a principal market. It's a small economy. You could have just got them sitting on the same table. You could have acted with Russia, removing sanctions in exchange, because people don't remember there were generally in place sanctions for Crimea, but historically Crimea was a Russian province, but this is not of the topic. They could have been acting at my advice, just sitting down in Kiev, finding a common way, building up economic relations between Russia, Ukraine, and Europe, and acting as a leader nation, as a leader reality. The choice has been to be not a leader, but a second-tier actor on the shoulders of United States. And it's quite obvious that interests of United States and interests of Europe are different. And I think there's a matter of fact that Europe wants to reconquer, regain a predominant position with the United States that have been shifting on the Pacific game, and they are acting instead as submissive reality, instead of building the opportunity to regain importance on the Atlantic scenario. And this is a matter of fact. And if Europe doesn't learn to act as leading reality, it would always be acting as a submissive subject to United States, to China, to the next big player. And this is what's not making Europe become a fundamental player on the global scenario. It loses its time following little stupid good-looking things, and it's not looking at the big game. As you say, you look at the finger, you don't look at the moon, and this is what happens in Europe.
All right, now let's look at it like a game, because really it is a game, no? Who really is benefiting from the conflict here? Because it appears that Russia and Ukraine are fighting, but if you look at it very well, it's actually more than just Russia and Ukraine that are fighting, no? Which
That's
means that
honest.
this war could actually has been avoided if this power that are beyond Ukraine has engaged in dialogue and have looked at it more clearly. And of course, we are looking at war. We are looking at the most lucrative industry in the world, the industry of arm production and
So,
proliferation. So I don't know if these
Obehi,
people. Yeah, yeah.
you
Please go
come
ahead.
you come from Africa, and I visited Africa quite often. I've got my family who has a farm in South Africa, and I traveled in Africa. And it's useless to say that weapon industry is something big in the economy. Now we are going out of the topic of inflation, but for sure we can say one thing: this is a proxy war between United States and China, and Russia and Ukraine are probably puppets, but we are just small subjects. We don't know what is the big geopolitical screenplay behind. And at this point, I think that who has a big interest are United States. Ukraine has always had a big relationship, like Poland, with the United States. There are many Ukrainian and Polish immigrants. There's a place in lower New York that's called Little Odessa. And this is something that lets you understand There's no little Moscow or little St. Petersburg in the United States, but there's a little Odessa, and there is in California a place called Leopoli, Lviv. It's in the Bay Area, and it's inhabited by Ukrainians. So there, it's a matter of fact there are many Ukrainians who had immigrated to the United States in the years, and uh, there is for sure something that we do not see. There is something that is over our heads. I'm not a geopolitical analyst. I try to see the world from international different points of view, trying to be informed through press from more countries. But one thing is given, and it's that for sure there is something much larger than the fight between Ukraine and Russia, or the invasion of a part of Ukraine by the Russian army. So it's something that's part that starts in the past. It starts when there's been the fall of the Berlin War, of the Berlin Wall, of Soviet Union, and it goes up to our days. I don't remember. I read somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, that there wasn't a gentleman agreement between Soviet Union and United States that Western countries would not be expanding their military facilities in the East. This has happened. I think that NATO is not even anymore something that's interest of United States today. I think it's more an instrument that smaller nations try to see as a parachute. So I enter NATO. I know I have my big brother behind, but the big brother is seeing that he has a lot of smaller brothers, and I don't know how much is the real interest of the United States to intervene if there might be any clash between a NATO country and another nation.
I
I
think it's
mean,
only
let's be serious.
let's be serious and let's be honest about it. I think it's only a question of time if they continue to play this dangerous game. Because until maybe that Article 5 would make NATO very attractive is modified, the United States will still be in war in Europe very, very soon.
And there would be
Because
no interest of United States for that.
so how do you see this game going on with all these countries that are joining NATO very close to Russia, and Russia has become the primary target of why NATO was set up, and you are going to make a border with that country? How do we justify it? How do we explain this one in a geopolitical sense of it?
But I think it's more than a fact driven by United States. I think it's a fact that's driven currently by the countries that were under Russia, under the Soviet Union. I was reading that the last presidents of NATO have been a Norwegian, a Danish, and a Dutch guy. And the key positions in NATO are all held by countries that were before in the Warsaw Bloc. So, it's something that's strange. So you have an organization where the biggest player are the United States. They are on the other side of the ocean, so no interest for them. I'm in North America, and you have all this plethora of small countries in Europe. I mean, do we really think that if Russia attacks kind of Estonia or Latvia, United States will send the world out in Third World War? Same thing for Ukraine. Yesterday, it seems there were discussions between Russia and United States on how to close this thing. And, it's a matter of fact. So Russia attacked Ukraine, and the discussions are made between United States and Russia. And it's it's something that, if you think about it, it's hilaric. Uh, do we really think?
And at the same time, it's quite delicate, the game that they are playing. Because what usually happens is that you say you are this, and people treat you as this. And because you want to defend this, which you say you are, then you do what you are not supposed to do. I think that is how the United States is probably dragging itself into this catastrophe. And what I found very abhorring, what I found uh, um, very sad in the whole story is that the United States is going to drag Europe into this, and a lot of millions of people are going to be massacred in this. Why can't people find
It's going to
alternative
be
to
an
this?
economic. Some time ago, there had been the former Larry Summers. He was working in the Trump administration, I think, if I'm not wrong, or in the Obama administration. And he said one thing that's quite wise. He said, in all this, there will be only one big victim. That's Europe.
Absolutely.
You know, so Russia is exporting everything. More or less, it produces anything. And the Russian people, we are used to see St. Petersburg. We're used to to see Moscow. Uh, I traveled to Russia. I went to places in Russia that are quite remote. I was in a place that was called Ufa. It's a wonderful city in the middle of green forests. And you know when you I made I was I went by train to Novosibirsk. No, not yeah, Novosibirsk. I don't remember the name. In the middle of Siberia, after the Urals. And if you go outside of the big cities, Russia is a completely different reality. Uh, Average Russian, maybe it's borscht and a glass of vodka per day. He drives a Lada, and he's not got many problems of being cut off from McDonald's or not having access to the last iPhone model because it's not part of their world. Then I agree. If you go to St. Petersburg or Moscow and you go in the city center, not in the suburbs, because if you go on Google Earth and you see what are the suburbs of these big cities, you are kind of looking at Soviet era concrete buildings, and that's where a fair 50-70% of inhabitants of these cities live. So uh, we are very used to luxury. We are very used to our Western living standards, and we think that putting sanctions to countries where we prohibit them to use our model of life will change their world. It's like I had a friend. She was an architect working in Italy from Iran, and she said, "Yeah, they cut off the banking system. They halted exports. Iran Air could not fly around. You know how many people take an airplane in Iran? Maybe 2%, 3% of the population. Same thing in Russia. You know how many people have an iPhone? How many people make international transfers? You know how many people from Russia go abroad? Uh, you, you know, you live in a city where you have tourists. How many? You don't see the hordes of Russian tourists like you see the hordes of Germans or French or Americans that go around the world. Yeah, you have some. Usually, you see them because they are the rich guys and they spend a lot of money, but there are not hundreds of Russian tourists around because there's a high level of social inequality, uh, but it's part of the country. It's part of how they live. There are people that are not used to make debt to uh, fill their needs. So if they can buy something, they buy it. If they cannot, they don't buy it. And it's a completely different way of life and social model compared to the Western world. And till Western nations don't understand that our lifestyle and our economic model is not the perfect model, but it's our model. It's not the perfect model to export around the world.
There is
You
an
know, it's
adage in my place that when you blind your eyes because you don't want to see your enemy, remember that it is your eye that you are blinding. You don't see your enemy, but you also don't see your friend because now
yeah.
you are blind. So talking of um, this sanction, this multiples of sanction that we see coming from the West, is it possible that the West can actually be hurting themselves in this sanction? That maybe Russia is not going to be moved anyway because we still see people dying. Are
I
they?
mean, it's obvious. We are seeing it. I think you go to the gas station as well. You go and buy food as well, and even if it's not directly affecting Western nations, it's indirectly affecting Western nations through a rise in prices, where we already had a problem with inflation coming from the money that had been printed and put in the economy during the pandemic. You combine this with a rise in raw materials, and you've got atomic bomb, not a weapon, but an economic atomic bomb. You see the values of inflation in the United States. You see Europe, we are 7.5%. European Central Bank has a target of 2%. And core inflation is around 3.5%, 4%. Core inflation is the inflation that's cleaned off from raw materials. So it's the real inflation, and it's twice the value of target inflation. And the thing that worries you more is that last year inflation was 0 point something, and core inflation was 0.0 something. So uh, let's say inflation was 0.5, today it's 7.5%. That means that it's gone growing over uh, 14 times, a 14-fold growth.
That is scary. It is
I
scary.
mean, in the 70s, so nobody wants to see this. In the 70s, you had inflation at 3% and it went to 9%. It's been a twofold growth. Here you had inflation at 0.5%, and today it's 7.5%. That's a 14-fold growth.
And who is going to subsidize this? Who is going to pay for this difference? Because we are not even talk of energy,
We
no?
cannot think that we cannot
Yeah.
think that we get subsidies by the government, because we are the government. I mean, if the government gives you money for the inflation, it's your money that's being given to yourself. It's useless to go around this. So we are in Italy, and there's been this 200 euro bonus that's not going to help anybody. It's going to be a big hole in the balance sheet, and the balance sheet is made by contributors' taxes. So it's our taxes. It's the money of people who work, and if you tell me you're giving me a contribution of 200 euros to cover an inflation cost rise, you're first of all joking with me, because 200 euros don't change my life, don't change somebody's life where you had oil price that has doubled and gas price that has almost tripled. And it's a matter of fact that under political elections, I don't want to be rude, but I'd never consider it something serious. And at the end of all this, someone will have to pay for it.
That is a point. Who is going to pay for it? Of course, the United States. Okay, because we talked about the Russia-Ukraine crisis and the possible effect of the rising inflation. And indeed it is. We have not talked about food yet, though, because that region of the world are the biggest producer of cereal, of food. And because they are in war, you can't expect them to be producing food.
We
People
have
are,
to, we still have to see the full effects. I was
absolutely.
I was listening to an interview made on CNBC, and they were interviewing Nouriel Roubini, who's an economist, and he was saying that we are still far away from seeing the effects of the shortage in agricultural raw materials, and we will be facing the effects in midsummer, and we will have the most effects. This is what this famous economist was saying. And there was even another economist that's called Mohamed El Arain, and he was pointing out something similar. He was saying, we do not still see the effect of a thing that's called price purchasing index. That's the rise of the goods that are used by manufacturers to produce goods. So today, manufacturers are selling goods that have been produced with the raw materials that they have bought last year. And if you go and see a thing that's called PPI, I will share later a few indexes. Today, PPI in Europe, in Italy, is around 30% increase. So that means that the rise from last year, if you were paying a piece of cloth to make a shirt 100 euros, this year you've been paying it 130 euros. So, and when you buy your goods to produce a shirt, you're not buying it today. You've been probably buying it 6 months ago. And so if you buy that shirt 6 months ago, you will have the effect 6 months later. So if today the price has risen of 30%, we will see it in September with a consequent rise of the price.
All right, that's it. Everybody is going to pay the consequence of this. And this is not because some people in Ukraine decided it, but some people outside of Ukraine, somewhere in Europe and somewhere in the United States, decided that this is how they want to run the system. They don't care about the people that are going to be killed. They don't care about how many people are going to suffer the consequences of that, and how they can possibly put the entire humanity in danger by exchanging nuclear weapon, by fighting in this. This is the most. I think we need to look for a way to hold our politicians responsible when they take stupid decisions. We
Well,
must look for a way to do that.
when there's one thing that people don't want to remember. In the 70s, there had been very strong geopolitical tensions, and Arabic countries just decided to cut short the production of oil. And that had brought two effects: high inflation and crash in asset prices, with people that were just scared to put to allocate their money. So you had the famous depression of the 70s with all the effects that came out. In Italy, you had the lead years with shootings, kidnapping of politicians. In United States, you had all the effects of the post-Vietnam War. You had the time where, if we ask our early parents, grandparents, they will tell you we were going around with bicycles. And all that came for geopolitical action to support Israel, and Arabic countries just cut off production of fossil fuel, of oil specifically. What as the United States has been doing in the last 40 years has been working to do not be in that position anymore. What Europe has been doing in the last 40 years? Nothing. Only France has been working to develop nuclear power plants and has agreements with its colonies to import uranium. So, it would not be a problem for France. But for the rest of Europe, Europe has been doing anything to prepare for an energy crisis, for uh, something that would have cut off the energy lines. And so you see, a story repeats itself, and it goes on. And when you have these events, you have to always take your history book and start seeing what has happened in the past and see if there's something similar. And strangely, when these things happen, there's always something similar. There's always been something that has happened, and that has been a mirror that you can see and evaluate for the events that are happening. I mean, and they're not going to be always perfectly similar, perfectly identical, but they will be similar. You will always find some similarities.
I believe you. They might not necessarily be the same. This time it's coming from another part. Because the European government that are decided to sanction Russia, maybe Russia finally decided, okay, I don't even need Europe anymore. I decide to cut off its gas supply to Europe. This is going to be disastrous.
But it will never happen. I mean, Europe can't cut off its gas supplies from Russia. They've been talking of strategies. I come from real estate. It takes you around 18 months to build a residential building. From when you do the, let's say, measures to when you finish and deliver the houses. The other day, I was reading the newspaper, and I don't remember what political from Europe said that in 3 years we will have 15 installations to transform liquefied gas in liquefied GNL, so oil gas, to gas in 3 years. They don't even have the locations. They don't have the planning. It takes you, as I said, 18 months to build from scratch a house, normal house, bathroom, ceiling, get the permit, start building, finish it, do all the refining. If it's not 18, it's 12. But and you want to tell me that in 36 months you're able to start and finish the installation of a whole installment to transform liquefied gas to aerial gas? I think it's not serious. Same thing. Yeah, it's same thing. They said we will use the gas ducts that arrive in Italy. So there had been an interview on the Financial Times from the manager of a big energy company. I don't remember. I think Canals Gas de France or something like that. And he was stating, we are already using the full capacity of the tubes. Otherwise, we will not be building new pipelines like the one they made, the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. These are answers that make you think of the politicians we have to deal with. So a manager that works every day in the gas industry obviously tells you if we would have had excess capacity in the existing pipelines, we do not need to build a new pipeline.
Some of them have alternative reality. It's okay. They want to keep the political position sometimes.
I mean, it's quite obvious. If you have one tube that's now I don't manage gas, but I try to use my brain. If you have a tube that's 1 meter width and it transports a given quantity of oil, gas, or whatever it is, and you have to build another one of 1 meter width. It's probable that it's because that first tube was not capable of transporting a further capacity of gas. I mean, they would have been,
That is common sense.
they would have been, in Germany they said we're not opening the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. And now the other day, the guy from EG Metal, he made a statement on CNBC. I have a very boring life. I don't watch TV. I follow some websites and newspapers, but I love reading interviews because they make you understand something from people. And this guy, he was saying, yeah, it's been an error not using the Nord Stream as a German pipeline capacity is already at the top, and we need to diversify supplies, because if we have a problem with one and we cut another supply from Russia, we would be in big trouble. On the other hand side, you listen to the German lady Ursula von der Leyen, who says that in 36 months Europe will have 15, 18 terminals to transform liquid gas in normal gas. I mean,
Amen.
we are really in the hands of people who don't know what they speak about, who live in a wonderland of. I joke about it. I mean, but they live in a wonderland of little Greta and Tesla electric cars without thinking on how to produce electricity to to charge the cars, or say you need to cut electricity or energy consumption, but don't know how to do it. It's a matter of fact. It's a lot of chit chat, but nobody has an effective plan.
Only that people are paying the consequences of that. I mean, real people are really dying there, just dying. You see your family member die, like what is happening in Ukraine as a result of some of those decisions.
People will be dying. People will be dying of hunger. People die of cold. People die of hunger. I mean, we are playing with something that we do not understand at today. At my advice, I mean, this is a personal position, but we do not see and we do not know which are the real consequences of the actions that are being made today. I mean, we have millions of people who live on a daily and have little food. I mean, look at Asia, look at Africa, look at South America. There are huge populations that need food, and if food prices rise, it becomes a problem because they rise even there. So while in Europe, okay, instead of eating one steak and the 2 plates of pasta, you will be eating a plate of pasta and a piece of bread. There are places where the question is, today I eat a piece of bread, and if prices rise, I will be eating a piece of bread every 2 days instead of a piece of bread a day, and that's going to be the tragedy. And as Mr. Lorraine was stating when I heard his interview, we still have to see the effects of what's happening.
What do you think is going to be the exit of this conflict that we have today?
Social unrest. It's gonna happen. It happened. It's when you don't have money in your pockets anymore to support the economy, and Europe today has a very high indebtment. It has a public debt that's skyrocketed. It's not anymore like in the 70s. In the 70s, you had the running economy. You had 50, 60% public debt. Today, you've got an average of 100% and plus public debt, aging population, and not so rampant economy. So, the only outcome is social unrest. It's bad to say, but when you don't get when you put your money, when your money is not valuable anymore and you put your hands in your pockets and you don't have a coin to buy bread, people get pissed off.
All right, we're going to leave that for that. Now let's look at the Italian asset market. What is the situation? Because yeah.
So all this, as we said, is affecting inflation, and inflation, on the other hand side, is affecting the asset markets. As you know, I work in the real estate industry. I even advise a small asset management company, and if inflation rises, even the yield that you expect from an investment rises. That means that if before you had a stock that was giving you a 1% yield while you had a 1% inflation, if the inflation rises at 3%, the yield that you would expect from by that stock is going to be 3%. So the value of that stock would have to be reduced of 2/3. Obviously, this is hypothetical, but we are seeing, as said, a rush on the real estate market because, by the way, real estate follows the price on the residential side, while on, let's say, the commercial real estate, where you have offices, hotels, we are starting to see a reduction in pricing because the valuation model for those assets is given by the yield they produce. And if you have a higher inflation, your expected yield will rise. And so we will be seeing, at my advice, a reduction in some asset classes, while obviously residential real estate will be keeping pace with the market rise. We have to say that commercial real estate grows when you have low inflation and low interest rates because it's structured to guarantee a yield, while residential real estate rises when you have inflation because people run after the curve and they try to stay on the market to buy a house that keeps the value. So they have two pricing dynamics that are quite different. Same thing, we will be seeing fixed income like government bonds that will have to rise. I mean, we have in Italy the famous thing about the spread. The spread has passed from 99 basic points to 200 basic points in 1 year. 1 year and some months when Draghi took position of prime minister, spread was 99 basis points, and today it went over 200 basis points. That means that it has doubled. And when you have something that doubles, it's when an increase is of 100%, it means that or the base was too low, or there has been a strong increase. In this case, we have a combination because a German bond that was paying 0% today pays 1%, and you add the spread, so it means that today an Italian government bond pays 3%. So you see, you are starting to see the rise of the effects of inflation on the rise of yields. So when you have a government bond that's paying 3% yield, and we were saying before that the core inflation is 3.5%, you're still under the core inflation, but you're sticking to what is the value of the core inflation. And we must remember that European central bank interest rates are 0% or minus 0.25%. So it's It's a matter of fact that market always reacts and finds its way through. And the problem is that in Europe, it seems we have a political system that unfortunately comes after and is not able to react. This is the reality. I was trying to find a clean manner to say it, but maybe giving it direct gives the idea.
What do you think is the effect of this inflation on small businesses in Italy, for example?
Small businesses are able to navigate inflation. On the first stage, you will be seeing the effects of the rising prices, but on a midterm, prices adapt and they make it brings small businesses to innovate, to become more efficient, to cut useless costs, and then on the medium long term to become more dynamic, more productive. The big problem is all the fixed income people. So payrolls with fixed salary, government employees, all these people that don't come from an environment where your output can be raised with the rise of inflation. If you have a small company and he buys his wood panel at €1, and now he buys it at €2, he will be probably raising the sale price of his chair from €4 to €5, and he will be recovering that extra euro that he has spent. Maybe he will put it at €6 because he will try to save the people that work with him and keep their fidelity, so give them as well a rise. And this is not happening where you have fixed payrolls given by no government or company or big companies where there's no profit-driven mentality. But Italy is a country that's made of small and very small enterprises, and it's always been a country that in inflative situations it became very dynamic. After the inflative boom of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s, Italy came out and it was the fifth economy in the world. So some say even the fourth, but by the way, for sure it was the fifth economy in the world. I give you my personal action plan that we are taking. We are trying to find operations where to invest. So we are acting on capital investment for productive assets. So we are, in our case, looking for opportunities where we can put the investment in action. We are even looking at ways to make our work more efficient. So we are investing today to be more profitable tomorrow, I would say. And this is something that I would suggest to any colleague that's managing a company. For sure, it might be stupid to hear, but this is the time to invest in machinery and goods, because you will be profiting in the near future of an output that would be higher priced than the price you pay it today. So even if interest rates might be a little higher, on the other hand side, you buy it with the current price, and in the near future you will be paying it with a rise in the incomes driven by inflation. So if, let's say you buy a machine to make shoes, and your shoes today were sold at €50, and you have a 10% inflation, and your machine cost you 100, when you will be selling your shoes at 60, that means that you have had an increase that permits you to pay back the 100 investment you have made. So personally, I think it's a time where you have to do investments in productive machinery and productive capacity, and you have to reduce, let's say, leisure consumptions, reduce the frills and useless expenditures that you have in a company.
All right, you know this because you have been in the real estate industry and also in the investment area. This is something that is not new to you. But for some individual in businesses who maybe are not pro, how do you think they should be able to know where to invest in?
Productive machinery, so machinery that allows you to generate income. So I don't know, let's say if you're an ice cream maker buying a new ice cream machine, uh, as prices will rise and you will be paying it back and possibly buying at leverage. So getting financing today, even if it's expensive, but by the way, it will be paid back with raised prices. So the nominal value of a debt you make today will remain, while the money that you will be making in an inflation driven economy will be higher. So let's say making investments in hard goods or soft goods that permit you to be more productive and have a higher output today, possibly with leverage, is a good action plan. I'm selling some property. I have to do investment on projects that are to be renovated or to be redeveloped. So now I'm selling an office, small office we had, and I will be investing the income of the sale in the development of apartments and car parks. So probably if there was not this inflation peak, I would not be using this approach. I would have been keeping the office, and probably we would have been not working on the redevelopment from scratch of apartments. So we would have a different strategy.
Thank you so much for that, Mattei. Now, what would be your last statement here to conclude the conversation that we have had today? Anything that you want to say to conclude it, please go.
Well, it's a difficult time, so what I'd like to say to my colleagues, to people who work, waking up in the morning and going to sleep at night after being looking at their business things, is never stop believing in what you do, and always challenge adversity, because these are times where if you're able to challenge adversity, you will for sure come out stronger. You will for sure come out more prepared to benefit of an easier economic environment. I remember I had my dad when I was a kid. He was caught in the crisis of the 90s. In Italy, real estate crisis of the 90s was very bad. And I remember I heard him cry sometimes at night, but every morning he was waking up at 6, and every evening he was going to sleep after looking at papers, trying to find solutions, and he managed to pass through. And he managed to pass through and then grow up. So, it's a matter of fact that you only have to be there, continue challenging, and not blaming others, but acting and being on the market to make business run.
Dear Mattei, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure on my
Thank
part.
you, Bay. It's always a pleasure.
If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewanfo. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you in the next episode.